April 9th, 1241. The fields outside Liegnitz, Silesia. A Polish scout named Wojciech crests the hill overlooking the Kacpok River valley, and what he sees makes him drop to his knees. The earth itself appears to be moving, thousands upon thousands of horses, more horses than he has ever imagined could exist in one place, stretch across the landscape like a living ocean. He counts the Mongol warriors he can see, perhaps 2,000 in the vanguard. But the horses are everywhere. 5, 6, 7 horses trailing behind each rider, spare mounts grazing in organized paddocks that extend for miles. The mathematical impossibility hits him like a physical blow. 20,000 Mongol warriors had brought 100,000 horses into Christian Europe. The scout races back to warn Duke Henry II of Silesia. But as he rides, he notices something that freezes his blood. Every stream, every creek, every watering hole along the route has been reduced to mud. The Mongols aren't just bringing an army. They're bringing an apocalypse that will consume every resource in its path. But the truth was far more terrifying than simple invasion. Before we uncover the truth about the Battle of Liegnitz and the Mongol horse revolution that changed warfare forever, when 20,000 Mongols brought 100,000 horses into Poland, keeping them fresh through constant rotation, make sure to subscribe to Fear Sermon and ring that notification bell. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers. Now, let's descend into one of history's most overlooked horrors. The day horses became weapons of ecological warfare. The year 1241 exists in a Europe that doesn't yet know it stands. At the edge of an abyss, Poland, Hungary, and the fragmented kingdoms of Central Europe are consumed with their own squabbles. Nobles fight over inheritance rights. The church consolidates power. Peasants work the same fields their grandfathers worked, believing the world extends only as far as the next duchy. They know nothing of the steppes. They know nothing of what's coming. In the Mongol court, 4,000 miles to the east, Ogedai Khan has ordered his grandson Batu and the brilliant General Subutai to complete what Genghis Khan began, the conquest of the world. The Mongols have already destroyed the Rus's principalities, burning Kiev so thoroughly that travelers 20 years later will report that the stench of death still hangs in the air. Now they turn their eyes west. Duke Henry II the Pious rules Silesia from his seat in Liegnitz. He's a competent leader, a faithful Christian, a man who has built schools and monasteries. His duchy prospers. The year's harvest looks promising. He has no reason to believe that April 9th will be his last day on Earth. But to understand what happens next, we need to understand something that European military commanders have never encountered: the Mongol horse system. In European warfare, a knight rides one horse, his destrier, his warhorse, carefully bred and expensively maintained. If that horse dies or tires, the knight is finished. The entire European military doctrine is built around heavy cavalry charges and static defensive positions. Mobility is limited by the endurance of single mounts. The Mongols have invented something different, something that turns horses from animals into a self-sustaining weapons system. Every Mongol warrior doesn't ride one horse. He brings 5, sometimes 6, sometimes 7. These aren't pack horses or simple remounts. This is a rotating system that allows Mongol armies to cover distances that European commanders consider impossible. While European armies trudge 20 miles a day, Mongol forces routinely cover 80. They can fight, retreat, circle back, and strike again before their enemies can mount a counterattack. The mathematics are staggering. Subutai's Western army consists of approximately 20,000 fighting men. By the time they reach Poland, they're accompanied by nearly 100,000 horses. Think about that number. 100,000 horses moving through medieval Europe. Each horse drinks 8 to 10 gallons of water daily. Each horse needs 20 to 30 pounds of fodder. Each horse produces 50 pounds of manure every day. In the spring of 1241, this mobile city of animals crosses the Carpathian Mountains and enters the Hungarian plain, with one prong breaking north toward Poland. The environmental impact is immediate and devastating. March 15, 1241. A village called Sandomierz on the Vistula River. A farmer named Clemens walks to the stream that has watered his fields for 3 generations. He finds mud, just mud. The stream that ran clear and cold even in the driest summers has been reduced to a trampled bog. Hoofprints everywhere, thousands of them, more than he can count. Leading east to west, his neighbor Pyotr says he saw them, riders in the distance, small men on small horses, moving in perfect formation. Like starlings, Pyotr says. like a flock of birds that moves as one creature. The local priest records this in the church register, dismissing it as possibly brigands or lost merchants from the eastern trade routes. This will be his last entry. In 2 weeks the church will be ashes. March 22, 1241. The town of Chmielnik, a merchant caravan arrives with wild stories. They claim to have seen an army, but not like any Christian army. No supply train, they insist. No wagons, just men and horses and more horses and more horses. They report that every town to the east has been abandoned. People are fleeing west with whatever they can carry. The local voivode, a regional military commander named Włodzimierz, sends scouts to investigate. 3 men ride out. None return. What Włodzimierz doesn't understand yet is that he's watching the Mongol reconnaissance screen in action. The Mongol advance doesn't move like a medieval European army in a single concentrated column. It moves like a net, with scouting parties ranging 60 to 80 miles ahead of the main force. These scouts ride in shifts, changing horses every 2 hours, never slowing down. They map terrain, identify water sources, locate enemy forces, and eliminate anyone who might warn others. The rotating horse system means these scouts can ride for 20 hours straight. By the time Duke Henry's forces understand the Mongols are in Poland, the Mongol commanders already have detailed maps of every road, every river ford, every castle, and every granary in Silesia. March 28, 1241. Tursko village, 30 miles from Liegnitz. The Mongols arrive at dawn. What happens next follows a pattern they've perfected across Asia and Russia. The horse archers, light cavalry riding small, nimble steppe ponies, encircle the village. They don't charge. They don't attack. They simply ride in circles at a distance of about 200 yards, just out of bow range for the villagers' hunting bows. The villagers watch, terrified but confused. Why aren't they attacking? Then the riders change horses. Within minutes, they've switched to fresh mounts from their string of remounts. Now they come closer. They begin firing arrows, not to kill but to frighten. Arrows thud into wooden walls, animals panic, people scream. The psychological impact is calculated. The villagers see warriors who never tire, who can sustain the attack indefinitely. After 3 hours of this circling, arrow-shooting harassment, the villagers break. They flee into the forest. The Mongols don't pursue them. They burn the village, catalog the resources, and move on. A survivor named Anna later testifies to church authorities. They changed horses like we change clothes. Fresh horse, fresh horse, fresh horse. How do you fight men who are never tired? How do you run from horses that never slow down? April 2, 1241. Duke Henry receives confirmed reports. His military advisors gather. In the great hall of Liegnitz Castle, maps spread across tables. Reports pile up. The picture emerges: an army of approximately 20 to 30,000 Mongols is moving through Poland. But the reports about horses make no sense. 50,000 horses, one scout reports. No, at least 80,000, another insists. The discrepancies frustrate Henry's commanders. What they don't understand is that they're both right. The Mongol horse herd is so vast that different scouts, seeing different portions of it, report wildly different numbers. The European mind can't process the logistical reality of what's approaching. Henry makes the decision that will kill him. He chooses to fight. He sends messengers to King Wenceslaus of Bohemia, who is marching north with an army of 50,000 men. The plan is to combine forces and meet the Mongols with overwhelming numerical superiority. It's sound military strategy based on European warfare doctrine. But European military doctrine has never encountered an enemy whose horse system allows them to be in 3 places at once. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button. The strategic nightmare unfolding in 1241 Poland represents a revolution in warfare that European commanders simply couldn't comprehend. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries and military history. Let's discover what happens next in this terrifying collision of 2 worlds. April 8, 1241. The day before the battle, Duke Henry's combined force, approximately 30,000 men including Polish knights, Teutonic knights, and various mercenaries, camps on the plains near Liegnitz. They expect to wait for King Wenceslaus, who is 1 day's march away. Together, they'll have 80,000 men to face the Mongol horde. The Mongol commanders Baidar and Kedan are watching from 12 miles away. They have a problem. If Henry and Wenceslaus combine forces, even the Mongol tactical superiority might not guarantee victory. They need to force battle now, before reinforcements arrive. This is when the true horror of the Mongol horse system reveals itself. At midnight, Kedan dispatches a 5,000-man cavalry force south. Their mission: intercept King Wenceslaus and delay him. 5,000 men on 25,000 horses ride 80 miles through the night, covering in darkness what a European army would need 3 days to traverse. They reach Wenceslas's line of march at dawn and begin the harrying tactics that will keep the Bohemian king from reaching Liegnitz in time. At the same moment, Bidar moves his 15,000 warriors into position around Henry's camp. But here's what the Polish scouts report. With growing panic, the Mongols aren't where they were yesterday. They've shifted position overnight. The entire army, all 15,000 men and 75,000 horses, has moved 15 miles in darkness across unfamiliar terrain. European armies don't move at night. The risk of disorder, of losing units, of horses breaking legs in unseen holes, it's considered tactical suicide. But the Mongols have fresh horses and perfect discipline. They flow across the landscape like water. Dawn, April 9, 1241. Duke Henry wakes to find the Mongols drawn up in battle formation just 2 miles from his position. He has no choice now. Wenceslas hasn't arrived. The battle must be fought, today. What happens next has been recorded by a Polish chronicler named Jan Długosz, writing 30 years after the event based on survivor testimony. His account is clinical and devastating. The Polish and German knights form up in traditional heavy cavalry formation. They number approximately 8,000 mounted knights, the finest warriors in Christian Europe, encased in plate armor, riding massive war horses bred for the shock of the charge. Behind them, 22,000 infantry, crossbowmen, spearmen, peasant levies. The Mongol force appears smaller. European observers estimate 15,000. And men. What they don't see is that another 5,000 Mongol cavalry are hidden in a tree line 3 miles to the north, and that each visible Mongol warrior has 4 to 6 fresh horses grazing in a staging area 2 miles behind the battle line. Duke Henry orders the charge. 8,000 knights in plate armor thunder across the field. It's a magnificent sight, the flower of European chivalry, lances lowered, banners streaming. The sound of hooves shakes the earth. This is how wars are won in Europe, the devastating shock of heavy cavalry breaking the enemy line. The Mongol front line doesn't meet the charge. They turn and flee. The knights pursue, certain of victory. This is exactly what the Mongols want. The European war horses are incredibly powerful, but they can maintain a full gallop for only about 2 miles before exhaustion. The Mongol ponies are smaller, slower in a straight sprint, but they're fresh, and they can maintain a canter for hours. For 20 minutes, the chase continues. The Mongol horse archers fire backwards as they retreat, a technique called the Parthian shot, which European knights find psychologically devastating. Arrows rattle off armor, kill some horses, wound some men. But the main effect is to keep the knights chasing. Duke Henry's knights don't realize they're being led into a pocket. The hidden Mongol cavalry swings out from the tree line and cuts off the retreat. The fleeing Mongol front line suddenly wheels with perfect coordination, the maneuver they've practiced 1,000 times. Fresh horses have been brought up. The entire force remounts on rested animals, while the European war horses stand heaving and exhausted. Now the Mongol horse archers begin their real work. They circle the European heavy cavalry at a distance of 50 to 70 yards, just close enough to make every arrow shot count, just far enough that the exhausted European horses can't close the distance. They fire in rotation. One unit fires, wheels away, dismounts, switches to fresh horses, then re-enters the circle while another unit is firing. The Polish knights are trapped in a killing circle. They can't retreat, Mongols behind them. They can't charge, their horses are finished. They can't stand still, arrows are finding every gap in armor, killing horses, wounding men. The massacre takes 2 hours. The Polish infantry, watching from their initial position, sees the disaster unfolding but can't help. When they try to advance, Mongol cavalry harassment, men on fresh horses conducting lightning raids and immediate retreats, keeps them pinned and demoralized. By noon, Duke Henry II the Pious is dead. The exact manner of his death is disputed, but Długosz records that he was killed attempting to retreat, pulled from his horse by Mongol light cavalry. His head was later paraded on a lance. The Polish and German forces lose approximately 25,000 men killed or captured. The Mongol losses are estimated at around 2,000. But here's what makes this truly horrifying. That same day, the Mongol force that intercepted King Wenceslas, 5,000 men on 25,000 horses, fights a running battle against the Bohemian vanguard, inflicts heavy casualties, and then retreats to rejoin the main army. They cover 160 miles in 36 hours. Wenceslas arrives at Liegnitz on April 10th to find bodies and ashes. The immediate aftermath of Liegnitz is chaos. Silesia lies open to invasion. The Mongol forces don't occupy territory, they consume it. What follows is recorded in church records, survivor testimonies, and later judicial inquiries as European authorities try to understand what destroyed their armies. The environmental devastation becomes apparent within weeks. A Franciscan monk named Benedict travels through the battle area in May 1241 and records his observations. Every stream for 20 miles is fouled with the filth of countless horses. The grazing lands are B.A. Ren as if locusts had passed. The very earth is trampled hard as stone. We found the remains of horse paddocks, organized grazing areas constructed by the Mongols, that held 5,000 animals each. The grass will not grow here for years. This is the horror that European observers are beginning to understand. The Mongol horse system doesn't just enable tactical mobility, it's a form of ecological warfare. 100,000 horses moving through medieval Poland consume and destroy the agricultural base that supports the local population. Wells are drained, pastures are stripped, forests are cleared for fodder. Even in victory, the land is left so damaged that famine follows. A papal investigator named Giovanni da Pian del Carpine is dispatched east in 1245 to gather intelligence on the Mongols. His report, Historia Mongolorum, includes testimony from survivors of multiple Mongol campaigns. One section is particularly chilling. They bring with each man 5 or 6 horses, which they ride in succession so that the horses are not tired. They can thus travel for 10 days without cooking food, living only on the blood of their horses. They pierce a vein and drink the blood. I have seen this with my own eyes. In this way they can sustain movement that Christian armies cannot match, and they can continue their pursuit until every enemy is destroyed. The legal and military response to Liegnitz takes years to formulate. In 1243, a council of European military commanders convenes in Krakow to analyze what went wrong. The conclusions are documented in a military treatise that survives in fragmentary form. The European commanders understand certain tactical realities. Their heavy cavalry doctrine is vulnerable to the Mongol horse archer system. They recommend deeper infantry formations, better archery training, and improved scouting. But they fundamentally can't replicate the Mongol approach because European agriculture and economics can't support it. Here's why. Maintaining the Mongol horse ratio would require European kingdoms to dedicate vast agricultural resources to horse breeding and fodder production. The European social system is built on feudalism, peasants farming grain for human consumption. The Mongol social system is built on pastoralism, vast grasslands supporting enormous horse herds. A Polish duke can't simply decide to bring 6 horses per night. He doesn't have the infrastructure. The political aftermath is equally devastating. Duke Henry's death leaves Silesia without a clear heir. His widow, Anna, struggles to maintain control as neighboring duchies circle like vultures. The Mongol invasion doesn't just kill soldiers, it destroys the political stability of entire regions. In Hungary, which suffers even more catastrophic defeats than Poland, King Bela IV loses approximately half his population to Mongol attacks and the subsequent famine. The Hungarian countryside is so thoroughly devastated that Pope Innocent V issues a special dispensation allowing Hungarian nobles to practice polygamy to rebuild the population. The disparity between male and female survivors, men died in battle, women survived in greater numbers, creates a demographic crisis. The most disturbing aspect of the aftermath is what doesn't happen. The Mongols withdraw. In December 1241, Ogedei Khan dies in Mongolia. By Mongol law, all princes of the blood must return to Karakorum for the election of the new Khan. Batu and Subutai recall their forces and ride east. Europe is saved not by military victory, but by dynastic politics 4,000 miles away. European scholars later debate what would have happened if the Mongol invasion had continued. The consensus is grim. In 1241, no European army has found a tactical answer to the Mongol system. The military technology and doctrine that will eventually counter horse archers, massed longbows, disciplined pike formations, early firearms, are decades away. The environmental records paint a terrifying picture of what sustained Mongol occupation might have meant. Agricultural production in the invaded areas drops by 40 to 60% and takes a generation to recover. The horse herds that sustain Mongol warfare require grasslands. Medieval Poland and Hungary are mixed agricultural zones. If the Mongols had tried to permanently occupy these territories, they would have needed to convert farmland to pasture, which means displacing or eliminating the farming population. A 1250 papal commission investigating Mongol capabilities interviews refugees who fled deeper into Mongol-controlled territories. One testimony survives. In the lands of the Rus, the Mongols maintain their horse herds by taking all the grain harvest for fodder. The Christian population is reduced to eating bark and roots. Whole districts stand empty, the people either fled or dead of hunger. The Mongols do not farm. Where they rule, the horses eat what would have fed men. This is the true horror of the Mongol horse system. It's not sustainable in agricultural Europe. The Mongol way of war requires consuming more resources than it can produce. In the vast steppes of Central Asia, this works. The grasslands regenerate, the herds move on, the cycle continues. In densely populated medieval Europe, it would mean systematic depopulation. European military writers spend the next century trying to decode the Mongol success. A 1320 treatise by an Italian military engineer named Marino Sanuto includes calculations attempting to understand the logistics. He estimates that maintaining 20,000 cavalry with a 5-to-1 horse ratio would require 100,000 horses consuming 1 million gallons of water daily, 1.5 million pounds of fodder daily, 15,000 square miles of grazing land in rotation, a supply chain that European kingdoms couldn't support. His conclusion: the Mongol way of war is impossible for Christian kingdoms to adopt, but it is also impossible to defeat without adopting it. We face an enemy whose strength comes from a social organization completely foreign to our understanding. The Battle of Liegnitz and the Mongol invasion of 1241 creates ripples that reshape European military thought for centuries. The immediate impact is psychological. European chronicles from the 1240s and 1250s speak of the Mongols in apocalyptic terms. They're called Tartars, a deliberate mispronunciation of Tatars mixed with Tartarus, the Greek hell. First chronicler writes, "God has sent them from the regions of eternal darkness to punish Christian sin." This isn't just religious hyperbole, it reflects a genuine trauma. European military confidence is shattered. The cream of Polish and Hungarian knighthood has been destroyed by an enemy they couldn't understand using tactics they couldn't counter. But over time, European military thinkers begin extracting lessons. The first major shift is in reconnaissance and intelligence. Before 1241, European armies rely on local guides and short-range scouts. The Mongol invasion demonstrates the catastrophic consequences of poor intelligence. By 1260, major European kingdoms are developing more sophisticated scouting networks, including long-range cavalry patrols trained specifically to gather and report information about enemy movements. The second shift is in understanding mobility as a weapon. European commanders begin experimenting with lighter cavalry forces. The Hungarian King Bela IV, whose kingdom suffered the worst devastation, completely reorganizes his military after the Mongol withdrawal. He builds a network of stone fortresses designed to resist horse archer harassment and develops lighter cavalry units modeled loosely on Mongol tactics. While Hungarian horsemen can't match the Mongol horse ratio, economic realities prevent it, they do adopt the concept of using speed and harassment over static defense. The third and most profound impact is on European understanding of global military affairs. Before E1241, European kingdoms are insular. They fight each other using familiar tactics and familiar assumptions. The Mongol invasion forces a recognition that the world is larger and more dangerous than they imagined. This drives the great information-gathering missions of the 1240s and 1250s. Papal envoys like Giovanni da Pian del Carpine and William of Rubruck travel to the Mongol court with an explicit mission: understand how they fight, how they organize, how they sustain their armies. The reports these envoys bring back become classified military intelligence, studied by European commanders and military theorists. One particularly important observation comes from Friar William of Rubruck, who travels through Mongol territories in 1253 to 1255. He notes, "Every Mongol warrior is trained from childhood to live in the saddle. They are taught to ride before they can walk, to shoot arrows while riding before they can read. Their women manage the horse herds with expertise equal to the men. The entire society is organized around the horse. To match them in war, we would need to reorganize our entire civilization. This is impossible. Therefore, we must find ways to neutralize their advantages rather than match them." This realistic assessment shapes European military development for generations. Since European societies can't restructure to support the Mongol horse ratio, they focus on tactical innovations that don't require it. The development of massed archery, particularly the English longbow, is partly a response to the Mongol threat. Military theorists recognize that horse archers dominate because of volume of fire and mobility. If you can't match the mobility, you need to exceed the volume of fire. English and Welsh longbowmen firing from fixed positions with extreme discipline can generate arrow density that even Mongol horse archers can't match. The evolution of pike formations and infantry squares represents another adaptation. European commanders recognize that horse archers rely on circling attacks. Tight infantry formations with long pikes create a zone that cavalry can't penetrate. By the early 1300s, Swiss and Scottish pike formations are demonstrating that disciplined infantry can resist cavalry charges that would have broken medieval armies. But perhaps the most lasting impact is environmental and economic. The devastation the Mongol horse herds inflict on Poland, Hungary, and the Rus' principalities demonstrates something European rulers have never seriously considered. An army can destroy agricultural capacity so thoroughly that recovery takes generations. This changes European thinking about warfare and resources. Before 1241, armies forage and plunder, but there's an assumption that the land will recover. After 1241, there's recognition that systematic resource destruction is possible and catastrophic. This leads to new laws and customs around warfare. The concept of scorched earth exists before the Mongols, but the Mongol example shows its extreme form. European military treatises begin discussing resource protection, defending not just castles and cities but grain stores, livestock, and water sources. The modern concept of total war has its roots in the lessons learned from the Mongol invasions. There's also a demographic legacy that haunts Central Europe for centuries. The population losses from battle, massacre, and famine in 1241 to 1242 create labor shortages that fundamentally alter medieval economics. Poland and Hungary actively recruit German settlers to repopulate devastated regions. This ethnic mixing creates new cultural zones and new tensions that persist for centuries. In Russia, which suffers Mongol occupation for over 200 years, the impact is even more profound. The Tatar yoke shapes Russian military, political, and economic development in ways that scholars still debate. Some argue that Russian autocracy and centralized control are direct responses to Mongol administrative methods. Others contend that Russian cavalry tactics and even certain linguistic elements are Mongol inheritances. The environmental impact fades more slowly than the political impact. Modern archaeological work on 13th-century battlefield sites reveals soil compaction and vegetative disruption consistent with massive horse herds. One study of the Liegnitz battlefield area published in 2003 found soil layers from the 1240s showing characteristics consistent with intensive trampling by large numbers of hooved animals. The grass composition changed. Certain native species disappeared while hardier, trampling-resistant species became dominant. What this reveals about human nature is perhaps the most unsettling lesson. The Mongol horse system works because an entire society organizes itself around a single military purpose. Every aspect of Mongol life, diet, family structure, education, economy, supports the maintenance of vast horse herds and highly trained cavalry. This creates military capabilities that sedentary agricultural societies can't match. But it also creates a society that can only sustain itself through conquest. The Mongol economy in 1241 isn't based on trade or production, it's based on extraction. The horse herds consume more than can be locally sustained, so the Mongols must constantly move, constantly conquer, constantly take from others. This is the dark mirror the Mongol invasion holds up to medieval Europe. Military supremacy built on unsustainable consumption. The Mongols perfect a system that makes them almost invincible in battle, but that can only exist by destroying what it conquers. When Ogedei Khan dies and the Mongol armies withdraw from Europe, they leave behind not just bodies and ruins, but a fundamental question that still resonates. How do you defend against an enemy whose way of life is fundamentally incompatible with your survival? The Mongol withdrawal from Europe in 1241 saved Western civilization from a collision that military historians believe could not have been won by medieval kingdoms. But it leaves us with haunting questions. What drove the Mongols to perfect a military system so resource-intensive that it could only sustain itself through endless expansion? Was it cultural, environmental, or something deeper in the human capacity for organizing violence? Leave your theories in the comments below. If you found this exploration of forgotten military history as fascinating and chilling as we did, subscribe to Fear Sermon for more lost chapters of human conflict. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the dark corners of history. Remember, the past isn't dead, it's not even past. The lessons of Liegnitz, about mobility, resources, and the terrifying efficiency of societies organized entirely for war, echo in military thought even today. See you in the next video, where we'll uncover another story that history tried to bury,